When we're doing investigations in sort of far-flung areas or extreme circumstances, the very biggest structure of the universe, the very smallest things, the things that happen at extreme energies, it's very difficult to do experiments. What you have to do instead is say, what would be a beautiful explanation of what we know that could explain a little bit more? And then work out the consequences of these aesthetic guesses and see if they work. I think that you can capture certain aspects of beauty objectively, and I do think that nature embodies them. I think we can say objectively that patterns of high symmetry, things that look the same if you move them around in different ways, humans find beautiful. They use it in ornamental art across many, many cultures. It's also a feature of the natural world. And then you go to the level of physical laws, and there you find more abstract concepts, but really deeply geometrical concepts used, and symmetry of the equations, which means that the equations can be transformed in many, many different ways and yet have the same content. It's equations of high symmetry and conceptual perfection that turn out to govern things in the actual physical world. A large part of what goes into the human sense of beauty is adaptive. Evolution has evolved us to enjoy interacting with things that kind of make sense and are powerful guides to how the world works. And that's why it's not entirely a coincidence that things we find beautiful are the things that help us understand how the world works. I look for things that might have beautiful solutions. So I'm looking for problems that have both intellectual beauty and conceptual significance, but also that say something about the real world. I think in broad contours, the scientific method has succeeded in understanding the physical world very profoundly. But the question of purpose, that's entirely different. I was born into a family of second-generation Americans. Our family was Roman Catholic, especially my grandparents, from the old country. They very much had those traditions. I was very, very taken in the idea that the world had a meaning and a purpose. It's understanding the glory of the universe, of God, of the creation, and sort of appreciating it and trying to live up to its promise. It's in many ways not incompatible with the life I took up, so to speak. As I learned more about science and studied philosophy, as well as studying the catechism and the theology, if you like, I had a kind of crisis trying to reconcile the two. I'm a theoretical physicist mostly, but actually interacting with the world is very helpful in keeping grounded. And the point of it is not just to spin out fantasies, but to actually describe and interact with the world and control the world. And of course, I went off in a scientific direction, but I never lost my aspiration to try to reconcile or to replace what was there and kind of finding the purpose and meaning in the world. I think we can imagine futures, and by imagining futures, we can focus on what's a good one, what would we like to see happen, right? And that could become a purpose. I think it puts things in perspective when you get this deeper understanding of what the world is all about and how the universe works. You realize that humility is very much in order, Cosmic self-respect is also in order. And optimism, if you learn about the potentials that are not yet exploited, that are revealed by fundamental understanding, it points to a potentially very bright future where people can be healthier, wealthier, and wiser than they are now. But to me, just the fact that the world is so splendid, each of us as a human being is gifted with potentially a life full of experience and joy, is good, and does, insofar as you identify the origin of that with God or with whatever you want to call God, that shows us the world is good.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Sarrazin, president of the Templeton World Charity Foundation. Obviously, I am not Heather Templeton Dill. Heather is recovering from COVID, and she's doing very well, and deeply sad to miss the event that is so close to her heart. I also know that the Templeton family as a whole appreciates this prize very, very much. And it is an honor for me to represent them and the three Templeton philanthropies tonight. Later, I will also be joined by Lee Cameron, who is a Templeton family member and current trustee of the John Templeton Foundation, to award the prize. So on behalf of the Templeton World Charity Foundation, the Templeton Religion Trust, and the John Templeton Foundation, welcome to the 2022 Templeton Prize ceremony in honor of Dr. Frank Wilczek. I'm so thrilled that in addition to Dr. Wilczek, tonight he is joined by his wife Betsy and members of his family here for this extraordinary event. Tonight we will hear about profound concepts and big ideas at the heart of beauty, truth, and flourishing. The video that we just saw gives just an example of such rich thought. It was the world premiere of the film, How Beauty Leads to Truth in Physics, and was produced in honor of Dr. Wilczek for tonight's award. Very soon, we will hear directly from Dr. Wilczek in an original speech, the Templeton Prize lecture prepared specifically for this event, and in it, he will lay out a bold and innovative vision for how science can help humanity imagine and identify the best futures for us to flourish in. And I'm so eager to hear what he has to share. After that, we'll be joined this evening by an expert interviewer, journalist, author, and podcast host, Derek Thompson. Derek is a writer for The Atlantic, the founder of the podcast Plain English, and a news analyst for National Public Radio. Derek is now at work on a multi-platform project focused on the idea of progress, a theme that resonates in profound and interesting ways with the ideas that Frank will also share with us tonight. At the end of the speech, there will be a Q&A with the audience, and so we encourage you to submit questions throughout the event. You can do so by scanning the QR code in your program, and then Derek will then select the questions to ask of Frank. Tonight I see so many friends and colleagues in the audience, but for those of you who are less familiar with the proceedings, the Templeton Prize was created 50 years ago by Sir John Templeton, and it recognizes those who have inspired the world by exploring the deepest questions of the universe and humankind's place and purpose within it. It is given to those with achievements that extend over the course of their entire career. Mother Teresa received the first Templeton Prize in 1973, and since then, the Templeton Prize has been given to many, many other extraordinary people. Humanitarians such as Dame Cicely Saunders, who is the creator of the hospice care movement. Humanitarians such as, religious leaders such as the Dalai Lama. and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and scientists such as Francis Collins, former head of the National Institutes of Health, and of course Jane Goodall, who received the prize in 2021. Sir John created the prize to fill what he considered to be a gap. There were many prestigious prizes that honor contributions in physics and chemistry, medicine, peace, and literature. Yet there's no honor that honor for those who push the boundaries of our spiritual understanding. Indeed, Sir John wanted to celebrate the contributions of those who marry scientific insight with a curiosity about the spiritual dimension of human existence. And he created one of the largest individual awards in the world to do just that. The Templeton Prize, in our view, is the world's most interesting prize because it honors individuals who have made profound and world-changing contributions and achievements in their own work, but they also embody a spirit of humble curiosity, of open-mindedness, to reach beyond conventional boundaries. This spirit is ever more needed in today's world. And so this is especially true of the remarkable person we are honoring tonight, Dr. Frank Wilczek. His openness to different ideas and perspectives has made his mind one of the most fertile in the scientific world. He's a Nobel Prize-winning theoretical physicist, and his investigations into the fundamental laws of nature have broken ground in our understanding of the forces that govern the basic units of matter. And he's also a natural philosopher who unites a curiosity about the behavior of nature with a playful and probing philosophical mind. In his book, A Beautiful Question, he asks, does the world embody beautiful ideas? And he answers affirmatively, yes. Drawing from science and aesthetics, he argues for an objective principle of beauty whereby the universe employs the most elegant structures to achieve spectacular and wondrous surprises. And also with the flair of an artist, he paints a picture of the universe in which space and time, logic and math form a pattern of awe-inspiring beauty. At the core of these achievements in physics and philosophy is a quest to discover the underlying order and inherent beauty of the universe. In both of these areas, he has enriched our understanding of the world. Throughout his philosophical reflections, there's also a spiritual quality to his ideas. By uncovering a remarkable pattern in the natural world, Dr. Wilczek has come to appreciate the different ways about thinking of reality, and through his written work, has invited all of us to join in a quest for greater understanding. And it is now my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Dr. Wilczek, and also Lee, come up and help us award the prize. Yes. So we're gonna move over here. Follow me. You're on that side, I believe. No. Oh, I'm on this side. Yeah, got it. Okay, so Dr. Wilczek, on behalf of the Templeton Prize and the organizations who support it, the John Templeton Foundation, the Templeton World Charity Foundation, and the Templeton Religion Trust, we are delighted to award you with the Templeton Prize. It includes a beautiful medallion with an image of the tree of life. You can hold it up here for everyone to see it. A tree of life, which symbolizes the breadth and meaning of the prize. We've also crafted a scroll that represents some key ideas and concepts from your life's work. There is an equation that represents your appreciation for mathematical beauty and how that ideal has guided you towards discovery. I think it has something to do with anions.
Yes.
I think it
That's
does.
how anions.
I had to ask a physicist friend to help me with that. But a yin-yang symbol that represents the idea of complementarity and how two different ways of approaching reality can both be true. juggling balls, we saw that in the video, that represent your fondness for learning new things and skills and hobbies, piano keys that represent your love of music, and the Nobel Prize icon as a reminder of your scientific contributions. So with that, let's please, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Frank Wilczek, the 2022 winner of the Templeton Prize. Okay, so come here.
Well, thank you very much. I'm overwhelmed. It's a great honor to be here. And I'm not sure I recognize the person that's been raised to the skies so much, but I'll try to fill in for that person. The citation for the Templeton Prize mentions or is described as harnessing the power of the sciences to explore the deepest questions of the universe and humankind's place and purpose within it. I think most observers, all observers really, would agree that the universe is fair game for science. But not everyone would think that science can address questions of meaning and purpose. To me, however, that's a big part of what science is for. It's a big part of what sucked me in to begin with. And in recent years, I've thought about it a lot. And I'd like to think I'm getting somewhere. So it's delightful to get some encouragement. Thank you. In this little talk, I'll introduce you to the threefold way, which is a simple yet powerful way of approaching deep questions. Then I'll use it to connect the power of science with the issue of purpose. The great philosopher David Hume argued that it's impossible to proceed by purely logical reasoning from statements about is, that is, about how things are and how they work, to statements about ought. Hume's arguments were so forceful and convincing that philosophers still today speak of Hume's guillotine, or the fact-value distinction that makes a sharp disconnection between the world of science and the world of purpose, and the world of law and morality. But I'm going to stick my neck out and suggest a way to loop around that guillotine. This is the threefold way. It's a charmed triangle that gives us a way around Hume's guillotine. It has three vertices. One is the world as it is, and the subject of science. Science also tells us the boundaries of what could be. And then, if we consider what could be intelligently, that informs the discussion of what should be. And then turning what should be into what is purpose. So this is the way around to get from science to purpose. Now, one of the sides of the triangle is not entirely logical. The question of going from could be to should be can't be determined by logic. Hume is right about that. But an achievable goal, and a very important one, is to elevate the level of discussion and make the choices clear. The threefold way is an important part of being human, literally. Whoops, what happened? There we go. I better check that you're seeing what I think you're seeing. The human brain is developed in evolution by having a gigantic structure laid on top of the basic mammalian brain. This gigantic structure, and particularly the frontal lobes, the biggest part in front, are devoted precisely, we think, or some of us think, or insofar as you can be precise about this still somewhat sketchily understood branch of neurobiology, is devoted to making plans, considering alternatives. In other words, to thinking about what could be, and then to choosing among those. So humans construct alternative scenarios. That's what a lot of their brain is for. And find ones that they like, identify ones that they like, and try to make them happen. And also, of course, identify ones that they don't like and try to make sure that they don't happen. Imagining is hard work. You have to make thought worlds instead of just picking up on the world that's actually out there. There was a famous graffito in the heyday of Haight-Ashbury in Berkeley, which said that reality is a crutch. I'm not sure that this is what they had in mind, but it fits. Einstein said it more elegantly: imagination is more important than knowledge. And I think that's what he had in mind. The Templeton vision, the pursuit of purpose, invites us to use the threefold way on a grand scale, to think about futures. That's futures with an S, because we're going to think about what could be and invent imaginary scenarios. And that's a good thing to be doing, because actually predicting the future is very, very difficult. As the famous philosopher and bad ball hitter Yogi Berra observed, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Here, Yogi anticipated modern trends in quantum mechanics and chaos theory, which put fundamental limits on predictability, as of course does the sheer complexity of the world with its many interacting parts. Also, we're most interested in selecting among and sculpting futures, not passively accepting them. So constructing futures, not predicting them. Now let me discuss the connection between what is and could be that's really so critical in the world today because of the possibilities opened up by modern science and technologies that will appear in coming decades. It is difficult to overstate the magnitude of these opportunities. I'll only here try to give a few indications. we've reached new frontiers of understanding and power in matter, in life, and in mind. We start with matter. Already in 1928, the great physicist Paul Dirac said, the fundamental laws necessary for the mathematical treatment of a large part of physics and all of chemistry are completely known, and the difficulty lies only in that the application of these laws leads to equations that are too complex to be solved. That statement has held up extremely well. As we've learned more and more about how the physical world works, the equations that Dirac was alluding to here, the equations that, not accidentally, he had a big role in discovering, of quantum electrodynamics, really do determine chemistry, have held up to experimental tests. And as we've understood more and more, we've tested those laws more and more accurately, and they've survived every test. What's changed, however, is that we've gotten a lot better at solving the equations. Because understanding empowers us to build marvelous devices, including some that help us to solve the equations. There's been a virtuous cycle. Better manufacturing tools allow us to build better mind tools, which allow us to build better manufacturing tools, and it goes on in a kind of virtuous circle, or better, an ascending helix of understanding. This is captured in Moore's law that now has operated for several decades, where the speed, power, and density of computation has doubled roughly every 2 years. Of course, it's not just an insular game of learning how to do better computations so that you can make machines that do better computations. Useful products emerge from understanding the world more deeply. Here's an important example, one out of many, but one that is in the process of changing the world and addressing some of our most important problems. That is, using the great fusion reactor in the sky, that is the sun, in order to supply the energy needs of mankind in a very clean and sustainable way. This comes out of fundamental understanding, specifically the process of quasi-pair production on an industrial scale. If you don't know what quasi-pair production is, that's the point. Nobody did until recently, and nobody knew how to use it efficiently, but by solving the equations, we have enormous power over nature, and we can do useful things. A very exciting frontier that's going in coming decades, and I mean decades seriously, this is not going to happen next year. Quantum computers will be especially good at solving the equations of quantum theory. This is a new kind of computer that embodies the laws of quantum mechanics in its very structure, and quantum computers really ought to be very, very good at doing quantum mechanics. They're very challenging to build, but there's been a lot of progress recently. This is opening up the prospect of chemistry by numbers, where you just calculate instead of doing chemistry experiments, or as a supplement to chemistry experiments. This process of having silicon friends that help us to exploit the knowledge we have and extend it in new ways is far advanced, as we've already mentioned, in computer chip design. It's also far advanced in things like aeronautics, which is maybe more analogous to chemistry, where people used to do elaborate tests in wind tunnels and had to build things and take them to the wind tunnel. And now you just compute. Another frontier is the frontier of understanding of life. And here, an important recent development is the realization of practical ways to do precision engineering, the so-called CRISPR technology. And this works hand in hand with sensing and information processing technologies that we can tell what's going on inside cells and know how to tweak them and how they respond to tweaks. And it would be difficult to overstate the promise and power of this technology. And here is Jennifer Doudna, one of the main developers and discoverers of this CRISPR technology, happily saying, let your imagination run free. What problems do you want to solve? It's an enormously powerful technique that will allow us to take, in many respects, evolution into our own hands, as well as helping cure diseases. Now, Jennifer asks us to ask, what question would we like to solve? The question I would like to understand is how mind emerges from matter. It's a tough question, a profound question that has driven philosophy as well as now science. It's a tough one in the case of biological minds, and you can see why if you contemplate for a moment this drawing of a very thin slice of a small organ in a cat, the cat hippocampus, dyed so that 1 in 1,000 cells takes up the dye, and it's by taking a very small thin slice, dyeing 1 in 1,000 cells with. You still see enormous complexity, and no one has given us the specs for this instrument. It's a very complicated thing and hard to figure out, and that's the challenge of understanding how mind emerges from matter, if it does. However, we have understood how some other powerful minds emerge from matter. After all, we built them. Okay. Some people are loath to call these things minds, but they'll beat you at chess. And the new quantum computers will beat you at quantum mechanical calculations. And in recent years, there's been a development of what's called deep neural networks, a new kind of computer architecture that's been able to address questions of pattern recognition, naming, picking out cats in photographs and things like that, that were specifically human abilities that were very, very difficult to capture in normal computer programming because we don't know how we do it. Didn't know how we do it. And now we have a pretty good hint of how we do it based on this successful computer architecture that was inspired by human neural networks and, in fact, looks a lot like them. So, in the domain of matter, in the domain of life, and even in the domain of mind, extraordinary prospects are opening up, and it would be difficult to overstate the power that this will give us. The question becomes, what are we going to do with this power? What should we do with the enormous powers we could have? This is where imagination and hopefully wisdom come into play. This is the side of the triangle that's not entirely logical, where we have to make choices. What kind of worlds could happen, not just in the sense of being physically possible, but in being in something that humans go ahead and do? Which ones do we want to happen? Now, I won't be able to answer those questions. Maybe next year. But I want to discuss a few aspects of it. One is that I've been painting a very optimistic picture of what could happen. But I think it's a realistic picture. Even though things look terrible from day to day, and progress is inefficient, people make a lot of unnecessary trouble for themselves. Nevertheless, the foundation of economic growth is technological progress, and that marches on unless you really mess up. And even in the 20th century, 2 great world wars and a depression didn't really halt the exponential growth of per capita wealth. So despite serious trials and tribulations, growth fueled by science and technology marches on. I was struck just today by how different Penn Station looks than it did a few years ago. And there's no end in sight. There's much more to come, as I've indicated. In many ways, I think the best is yet to come. Already, also back in 1928, the great economist John Maynard Keynes anticipated this question. He had a clear, optimistic vision of the future in terms of material wealth based on data like what I just showed you. And he asked, then what? What are you going to do with this wealth? So the real question is how to live wisely and agreeably and well. What should we do with this power? Well, if you Google utopia and do a search, you'll find many visions for what the world, a perfect world, might look like. Most of them, actually, have a kind of strange wisdom because they're based in history. They are sort of, a lot of people, in fact, like to imagine going back to Victorian times or going back to ancient Greece. Now, always, of course, they want to be in the upper classes here. No, they don't want to be the slaves or the servants. But with the abundance that technology is providing, in fact, you could live like that. Everyone could live like that. Have servants that are machines. Another vision, a broad class of visions of utopia, I would call the lotus eaters. People that just want to live off the fat of the land, do nothing, or dance in the forest, and that's a possible thing too. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. There could be different choices that people make. There are dystopian futures on offer too. Things could go very badly wrong for a very long time. This is part of thinking about going from could be to should be, because these are things that definitely could happen. Don't want them to happen, but for them not to happen, we have to make sure that they don't happen. This has happened before. There were promising developments of civilization The Roman Empire is the most well-known to Westerners like us, but there are many others where civilizations collapsed from excessive greatness. That's what Edward Gibbon ascribed the fall of the Roman Empire to, which in modern terms, more in the nature of Jared Diamond's discussions, we would say by overtaxing the ecology of their ultimate economic support. And other civilizations, sometimes under the same stresses, have also destroyed themselves through warfare. Science and technology have given us the power to mess up even more so on a global scale, and very specifically through the dangers of climate change and nuclear war, which are all too real. My own take on this was inspired on what should be, was inspired, inspired by my life, but also inspired by what I see around us, but also inspired specifically by a science fiction writer named Olaf Stapledon, who in a book called Odd John, a story about a super intelligent mutant, that was John, it's written by a biographer who's an ordinary human, and the biographer reports a conversation in which he asks John, what do you think of me, basically? And John says, I think that you are the Archaeopteryx of the spirit. And that's meant, I think, to be a put down, but it's an oddly affectionate put down, because Archaeopteryx was a noble creature. It was trying to fly, didn't do it very well, but it was the vanguard of the attempt to take flight at its time. And to me, we really are the Archaeopteryx of the spirit. These tools, these silicon friends, this increased understanding, this genetic engineering, which will make our children longer lived, stronger, and smarter than we are, is a noble end in itself. And we don't have to pick out the future. They will be our descendants that are smarter and wiser, and they should have their say. So to me, the purpose is to keep going and keep doing better and keep exploring. Instead of the spirit of the lotus eaters, the spirit of Odysseus who dragged them away. These are difficult questions, and opinions may differ, and I don't presume to think that my answers are the best answers or the only answers. But one thing is for sure, if we don't think about these things, if we don't think about what we want to happen, it's very unlikely that it will happen. So thinking about what you want is a very important step in making it happen. And in fact, once you realize what world you want to have, the powers of science and technology can get you there. So that's my answer to Hume, and really is the main part of the talk, and that's the grand conclusion. But as a sort of coda, I wanted to say one more thing about this link between what should be and is, that is very much in the spirit of the first part of the Templeton citation, the deep questions about the universe and how we make progress, or how many of my heroes and I myself have made progress in understanding the world better. That really is very much in the spirit of this threefold way. Thinking about what should be has proved an amazingly successful way to figure out what is. The world really does embody beautiful ideas, especially ideas of symmetry and simplicity. I put symmetry and simplicity in quotation marks because their meaning here is a little different than in common language, and maybe we can explore that in our discussions, but not so different that they don't convey the same spirit. And Eugene Wigner, a great physicist of the 20th century, who really brought the whole mathematical apparatus of analyzing supersymmetry into quantum mechanics, with great success, said that the miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics in the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift that we neither understand nor deserve. I love that. We don't deserve it, but there it is. We get it. But Einstein also summed it up nicely. The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible. So I hope you can take away from this the threefold way that is a means that I think is quite real and concrete of making connections between science and purpose, and also that the world is a beautiful place, and by thinking about in fundamentals how it should be, you're led to pretty good guesses about how it is. Thank you.
So that was just an incredible buffet of ideas that I can choose from. And I think I'm going to be rude and start off menu and ask you this question. What do you think is the most important thing that we don't know?
I think, well, let me answer. You have to weigh what's important versus what's accessible. I think the most important thing we don't know is how mind emerges from matter. That's, I mean, presuming that it does, I think there are very good reasons to think that it does. For one thing, as I mentioned, we've designed minds that are definitely emerging from matter. That's how we design them. Also, in physics, when we do delicate experiments to test things very accurately, we have to take all kinds of precautions about shielding from the shaking caused by trucks driving by, controlling the temperature, making a high vacuum, shielding from stray radio waves and magnetic fields and so forth. But one thing that has never been necessary is to worry about what the guy next door is thinking, or to be careful about what you're thinking, because so it doesn't seem that there's a separate mind influence on the physical world. That, in other words, that mind is a part of the physical world. And if we understood it, of course, we'd understand ourselves, and that is a wonderful thing in itself. And if we understand ourselves, we can try to do better also.
When you say mind as different from matter, Are you talking about consciousness? Consciousness plus the ability to imagine things? Like what is the thing that distinguishes mind from matter in this articulation?
It's very difficult to put your finger on it. I think, but certainly characteristic, we'll know it when we see it, I think. And it's certainly ability to come up with connections that are surprising is part of it. And the ability to make connections, to deal with novel situations, to live the threefold way. I think that's what mind is for. I mean, that really is what mind is for. Literally, that's a big part, and maybe in some broadly interpreted, the main goal, the main function of our frontal lobes that make us human.
I want to talk about the threefold way. You have is, could be, should be.
Yes.
My question for you is, what is the tool that we should use for each of these?
Yes.
So to discover what is,
Yes.
I would say we use the scientific method.
Yes.
Okay, so you're with me so far. To discover what could be, what I thought as I was watching the talk is, what could be is anything that we can imagine that lives within the lines drawn by physical laws. Anything could be if
Yes.
it adheres to physical laws.
Yes.
What's a better
no,
tool
I meant
to
I meant
understand
a little bit more than that. I meant not only things that are possible in principle, but things that are possible in practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I also always like to say, well, I often see discussions and proposals in physics where people say, or for that matter in technology, where people say, it'll take us 20 years, but then we'll have fusion power or something like that. And my rule of thumb is that if people talk about what they can do in 15 years or more, they have no idea how long it's going to take. and if you look at the historical record, that's a very sound principle. But science, science is different now than it was even at the beginning of very different than what it was at the beginning of the 20th century. At the beginning of the 20th century, we had only vague ideas about what matter is by present standards. We didn't have quantum mechanics. We didn't have quantum electrodynamics. We didn't have quantum chromodynamics. We didn't have any parts of what's now called the standard model that's so powerful and accurate, and as far as we know, a complete description of what matter is, adequate to describe to form the foundation for all of biology and chemistry and all forms of engineering and geophysics and so on. We think we got the equations. Solving them is another matter, as Dirac said, but we're getting better at that too. And in the study of life at that time, which is not that long ago, people had only vague ideas about how heredity works. Very vague ideas, if not, maybe not even qualifying as ideas about how metabolism works. And now we understand those things very well at the molecular level. And that gives us enormous, and in the context of mind, people had not the vaguest idea about, they had experience, but in retrospect, they had not the vaguest idea about how to play chess well. They thought they did, but in fact they didn't. Or how patterns can be recognized, or how to do massive calculations and store and deal with massive amounts of data, and now we do. Mm-hmm. So things have changed qualitatively. Our ability to control the world and predict, I don't want to say predict, but scope out what could be is now much more concrete and comprehensive than I think most people realize, because it's a recent development. So science takes us a long way in going from what is to what could be, not just in principle, but in a practical sense, what things could be achievable within a few decades. But all of these things are subject, in the real world, are also subject to politics, economics, and so forth. So, and that's kind of above my pay grade. But I think those decisions are too important to be left to the people who think that they should make them based on their guts or their wealth or whatever, their ill-gotten wealth or whatever. It should be informed by the best ideas about how the world works that we have. So that's where science can make a very important platform and sort of lead the discussion of what could be in productive directions.
The concept of beauty comes up over and over again in your work. What is beauty to you?
Well, it's another of those things, you know it when you see it. And a difficulty with many of these big concepts is that their use in common language is very loose. So people mean very different things by beauty when they talk about it. They also mean very different things by God and so consciousness. But there are specific forms of beauty that I think are objective in the sense that they are characteristic of many, many cultures and can be identified, and sort of you can define them precisely. And among those is the concept of symmetry. If you look at decorative ornaments in many, many civilizations, you see that they like patterns. If you look at people's bathroom tiles, they like these symmetric patterns. If you look at mosques, they're symmetric patterns. And amazingly, it turns out that the fundamental laws that nature likes also have this property of symmetry in a very specific way. So what is symmetry? The mathematical concept of symmetry that governs both of them is that an object or set of concepts is symmetric if you can make changes on it that could have changed it, but in fact don't. So a circle is very symmetric because you can rotate it around its center, and every single point moves, and if you had a lopsided shape, it would not be the same after you rotated it, but a circle is a symmetric shape. You rotate it, it looks the same. The laws, the fundamental laws of nature, it turns out, allow truly extraordinary degrees of symmetry. You can change the meaning of the symbols. You can change from one time to another. So the laws, that's a way of saying that the fact that the laws don't change in time is a symmetry. Because, but they're much less familiar and extraordinarily powerful symmetries that almost dictate the form of the laws of nature that turn out to be very successful. For instance, I mean, not to be too self-serving, but the laws that govern the strong interaction are governed by equations of extraordinary symmetry that one would not have come upon by sort of empirical stumbling around. But what you have to do is guess that the laws are governed by equations of high symmetry and see if that's true, and it turns out to be true. So so symmetry is definitely one. The other the other truly profound way in which I think the laws are beautiful is in simplicity, which I mentioned, simplicity with a special meaning of simplicity. Simplicity has a very specific and precise meaning in this context, which is that you could capture all the content of the laws, in precisely, without loss of content, in a very short computer program. It'd be much shorter than the operating system of any modern computer, let alone a program like Word. So really, there's a strong sense in which the universe is simpler than Word. And the operating system of the universe is simpler than the operating system of any modern computer.
There's this beautiful, in your book, a beautiful question. You talk about the fact that symmetry has to live alongside exuberance.
Yes.
You have this the photograph of the interior of a mosque and a cathedral, and you show that when you look up at the interior of a beautifully painted mosque, or you look at, say, a Pollock painting or a beautiful Picasso, what you're seeing is not mere simplicity, not just a perfectly symmetrical, simple drawing. What you're looking at is actually extremely complex, but its complexity is bounded by symmetry. And what I loved about that definition is that there's something very spiritual about it.
Yes.
This idea that everywhere we look, we see simplicity and symmetry replicating itself, that there are only a handful of forces that govern the universe, that all of our understandings of those forces have within them a kind of symmetry.
Yes.
I mean, there is a spirituality to
I think it is. Well, it's very much related to the tree of life, if I may say so. You have seeds, in this case, the fundamental laws, which you can write down, but then to unfold them. Okay, you can teach the laws to a computer, and in principle, it could go to work and then produce the periodic table and all the behavior of chemistry and so on. But it would take a very long time, first of all, and it would be a process of unfolding, where you take these equations and unfold their consequences. And it's very similar, I think, to the process, well, at a sufficiently high level of abstraction. It's very similar to the process of an organism growing from a seed, from genetic instructions, which are relatively compact. We now know the human genome, again, is much shorter than many a PDF file. For instance, the PDF file that I sent for my lecture was much longer than the human genome. Many images have more information in them than the human genome, but the human genome has something that you can unfold the consequences of and make a human. So simplicity plus exuberance is what runs the world, I think.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
It's a beautiful thing, yeah.
In the video, you talked about the fact that there was a period of your life when, in your attempt to reconcile, or this is at least what I took from the video, you'll tell me that's your own life, I won't tell you. In your attempt to reconcile your work, the science, and your faith, or at least sense of spirituality, of religion and God, you had a kind of existential crisis.
Yes.
I'm very interested in hearing what that existential crisis was and what your own solution to it was.
Okay, well, this is a little personal, but I guess that's what I'm here for. All right, in the Catholic faith, there's a process called confirmation. So you get baptized as a baby, you don't know what's going on. But then when you get to be a teenager, I think I was 12 or 13, there's a process of confirmation where now you're told, you learn about what you're supposed to be attesting to, and then you say, okay, yeah, I agree with that. So we went on a retreat preparatory to confirmation and got intense exposure to the ideas and the dogmas. And I took that very seriously. I took it to heart. But at the same time, in parallel, I was studying science. I wouldn't call it my work at that time. It was just learning things, that made a lot of the things that I was being taught in the doctrinal studies seem very paltry. I said, where is the Big Bang? Where is the grandeur of the size of the solar system and the long history? And where is the knowledge of how the world works that you find in science books? This doctrine, on the face of it, looks like what would be produced not by an all-knowing deity, but by human beings who had a very partial and in many ways inadequate understanding of the world around them. So that was my crisis. And it was helped a lot by reading Bertrand Russell. So I, shortly after being confirmed, I kind of walked away from it. And for many years I focused on the technical work in science, which of course I still do, but in recent years I've come back to those basic questions because now I think I know how to make some progress on them.
This is my last question.
Yes.
Before we move to take some of the audience questions that I have on my phone that you've submitted. This actually goes back to your triangle. I asked before, what tool do we use to say what is science? What tool do we use to understand what could be a combination of imagination and our understanding of the physical world?
Disciplined imagination.
Disciplined imagination is beautiful.
Yes,
In thinking about what tool should we use to understand what should be, it seems like one answer might be philosophy, might be religion. Maybe just say a little bit more about the tool that you're using in your book that you're writing and the project that you're doing to figure out what futures we should hope for, what futures should be. What is the scientist's tool to understand what those futures should be?
I'm thinking about neural nets and the fact that a lot of our knowledge is implicit. Okay, if we try to tell a conventional computer, how to recognize a cat in a scene, for instance, people can't do it. People tried to do it. That was sort of the classical program of artificial intelligence, and it failed very badly because we don't know how we do the things we do. And I think similarly, we don't know how we make judgments about what an attractive future would be or not. But what we can do is when you make examples, just as you present a lot of examples of possible scenes with cats, you present a lot of examples of possible worlds, and people can recognize what they think are attractive ones, things they want to have, and things that they don't want to have happen. And I think different people will come to different answers, but you asked me what the tool is. I think the tool is, at present, the best tool we have is people. And considering and making informed decisions based on the best constructions we can make of what could be about what should be. That's the nature, that's my threefold way.
To start with the questions range from the personal to the profound. We'll start with, do you have a preference for personal versus profound? No? We'll start with personal.
Whatever.
Dear Professor Wilczek, could you share with us, this is from Joy, excuse me, thank you, Joy. Could you share with us your daily routine to help ensure and maintain your capacity to think clearly? Thank you. Parentheses, meditation?
No, I don't do meditation. I do Wordle in the morning when I wake up, and I do the spelling bee.
Owned by the New York Times, by the way. Sponsored plug.
And I do juggling, and but yeah. So I have a whole rig, and I make coffee. In recent years now, for many years I've actually been a pescatarian, so I try to be careful about what I eat. I try to sleep enough. I have a very joyful and supportive family. Those are all extremely helpful things in keeping going. I have many colleagues that I love also, and I read papers. I talk to people. I take walks, and think about how our understanding could be better, what's lacking, where the promising opportunities are. That's what I do.
Quick follow-up on the coffee. Are you?
I have actually. I have another
pour-over?
threefold way that I.
Oh,
Let me just
go ahead.
finish that with that, which is think, play, repeat. That's my threefold way of. You asked me how I keep going. That's how I keep going. Think, play, and then do it again, right?
And just briefly on the coffee bit,
Yeah.
are you an automatic person, or do you like to construct your coffee with pour-over or an AeroPress or French press?
I'm easy. The essence is caffeine, I think.
Okay.
And
Simplicity. Simplicity.
these days, because it's convenient, I really just use, freeze dry.
Extreme simplicity.
Yeah.
You practice what you preach. This question is from Narayani. She says, do you think that the universe was born of intelligent design, or do you think the universe got created as a serendipitous event?
Well, neither. I mean, I don't think those kind of psychological terms are appropriate to what we've learned about the early universe. The description of the early universe that's been very powerful and has led to many successful predictions about things you should see is more abstract. It says that the universe began as a very much hotter, very much denser place and has been expanding ever since in accordance with the laws of physics that we've discovered here on Earth, and by studying things as they are. This because of this very powerful property of the laws that they don't change with time. And we can check that, and it seems to work, and then we can take things, experiments that we do today, and extrapolate back. Yeah, well, and the hypotheses about the early universe that emerge are kind of abstract ones, that the universe was in thermal equilibrium at a very, very high temperature. The laws of physics are the laws that we know today, and you just let them unfold. And if you allow a few fudge things that we don't really have nailed down yet, like this dark matter that astronomers want, which I think I know what it is, but it hasn't been proved, then that's how it works. Now, you can always keep asking why, and you can derive joy and satisfaction from different speculative answers, but as far as testable hypotheses, they seem to take a more abstract form of mathematical proposals for physical laws, and to postulate an well, let me just say a little bit. I'm kind of blathering on, but that the intelligent design, I think, is especially strange as an idea because it sort of puts a complex product as the explanation of a fundamental simplicity. The kinds of intelligence that we know about are emergent properties of many, many elementary constituents working together according to simple principles, but because there are many of them hooked up in just the right way, they can do marvelous things, like in that picture of the hippocampus that I showed. So if you want to have intelligent design that makes the universe, you have to ask, well, what made that brain that does the intelligent design?
This is the Bertrand Russell problem.
So, yes.
What supports the turtle? And it's
Yeah,
all the
exactly.
way
Yes,
down,
yes,
right?
the turtle.
God's all the way down. I asked you earlier about what question you thought, the most important unsolved question in science, and you gave a great answer, but also a local answer, the brains inside of our head, what explains how matter became mind.
Yeah.
If I said, what's the most important unanswered question we have about the cosmos, at the cosmic level,
Yeah.
what would be the answer to that question?
Well, here I think we really have to weigh importance versus accessibility. So, I mean, in importance, we'd like to understand, okay, why is the universe exactly the way it is? Great, that would be a wonderful question to answer, but it doesn't seem that we are anywhere near actually being able to answer it. I think when you balance accessibility and importance and concreteness, I think the ripest, really important question is, what is this dark matter that astronomers need? Just as in the later part of the 20th century, as the so-called Standard Model came into focus, and we had this extraordinarily powerful and complete understanding of ordinary matter, that is the matter that we're made out of and is in biology and chemistry and all forms of engineering and runs stars and so forth, and sort of patting ourselves on the back for understanding that profoundly. The astronomers threw us a curveball. They found that that's only a small part of the mass in the universe. And there's something else that's definitely not something we've studied so far that's contributing roughly 6 times as much mass, and that plays a very, very important role in the evolution of the universe. So what is it? And that seems like an accessible question, because we know it's out there. We have very powerful tools for investigating stuff that's out there. and so there are various guesses that suggest possible experiments, and I think it's quite conceivable that we'll know within a few decades, which I told you means I have no idea.
Next question is from Ben, and it's about the moment of discovery. What does the moment of discovery feel like to you? Would you associate it with a feeling of awe?
Well, I've made a handful of things I would call real, at least to me, breakthrough discoveries in my career. And they're different. It's not always the same thing. In the case of asymptotic freedom and QCD, that is the thing I got the Nobel Prize for, it was, the moment of discovery was kind of, well, first of all, it wasn't actually a moment. It was an extended period of a few hours, or maybe a day or two, and it was a feeling of just relief, because I was doing difficult calculations, and because they were difficult, I was doing them in different ways that should have given to the same answer, but they didn't. And it took me, I filled notebooks with these calculations, trying to get it. The moment that I remember is when suddenly I got them all to agree that I fixed all the algebraic mistakes and so forth. So it wasn't a moment of grandeur. It was just a moment of relief. That, God, finally, I have an answer. And then it was only really the next day that I realized that was a really interesting answer that was enormously leveraged and would lead to profound understanding of a big open question in our understanding of the world. In another case, another case was more like a mystical experience. It was just after a seminar where someone had explained something called fractional charge, and how you could calculate in this very special model that electrons kind of got broken in half, and And I was explaining to a colleague who had missed out on the seminar what this was, and I started writing equations, and I realized, actually, there's another way of understanding it. I was writing at the board, and it was almost like the concepts took over, and the equation just wrote itself, and that turned out to be a very important equation that opened many doors. So there are different experiences.
Right, the latter is sort of like a classic eureka moment where you feel sort of pulled along by this almost mystical force of discovery, versus the former, which sounds like just a lot of hard work followed by this rush of relief. Oh, finally, I can go to sleep now.
Yeah, exactly. And then, it sounds like a very quick discovery in retrospect, but in real life, something that you understand over the course of a few weeks or a few months, that's a lot of independent thoughts. and a lot of other things happen in that. You eat, you go to sleep, and so it's not kind of like a moment of blinding revelation of Saul becoming Paul on the road to Tarsus. Right? No, it's not. That can happen, but it's not the usual case. Yeah.
Last question that we have is from Joe. And this is a good question to end on. What role would you personally like to play in identifying beneficial futures for humanity?
I'd like to make this way of thinking about it popular and productive. And so, watch for my new book.
Futures by Frank Wilczek. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to Frank and Derek for the wonderful conversation and answering the questions. I know I felt like an Archaeopteryx of the spirit just listening. One of my favorite quotes from Sir John Templeton is that now is the blossoming time in the creation of humanity. And I think that conversation really embodied that sense of optimism and discovery, that there are still things to discover about this world that we're in, of humility, that we don't know all the answers, and ultimately of gratitude as well. Thank you to everybody for submitting questions, as well as those of you who have joined. This brings us to the end of the proceedings of tonight's program in celebration of Dr. Frank Wilczek, the 2022 Templeton Prize winner. On behalf of the John Templeton Foundation, the Templeton World Charity Foundation, and Templeton Religion Trust, thank you for joining us. We encourage you to continue the conversation as we move into the reception, so thank you very much, and good night.